My name is Eddie Hazelett. I'm past master of Paintsville Lodge 381 and current secretary. I was initiated in October of 2011 in this very lodge here, Paintsville Lodge 381. I had lost my grandfather before I was born. I never knew him. He died in 1964, and he was past master of a rural lodge, East Point 657, which is also located in Johnson County. As I grew up, I met many men that knew him throughout the community and bragged on his character, his commitment, his dedication. So I thought one of the ways that I would maybe get to see who he was, what things he held important to himself in his heart, was joining Freemasonry. So after I got out of college and moved back to Paintsville with my wife, I petitioned the lodge, and thankfully I was allowed to enter the door. I've been a detective for 22 years now. I'm a Commonwealth detective. I serve Johnson, Martin, and Lawrence County. My office is in with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office of the 24th Judicial Circuit. I handle just about every felony case in Johnson, Martin, and Lawrence County. I guess the positiveness about having that job is you get to see the negative impacts of society. You get to see a lot of crime, a ton of addiction. So therefore, my wife is very supportive of Freemasonry and other appendant bodies. So therefore, she realizes that I do find an outage from what goes on in the day-to-day world and society by traveling around and seeing positive stories, whether it just be charity of a brother educating another brother to be a better person, or you see charity given from lodges to their local communities. Initially, I did not receive the degrees to the capacity that I wished I had. But by the grace of God and the ability by a mentor to teach me how to travel, I traveled and sought out as much as I could find. I believe that we look for reasons to belong to something as important as Freemasonry. And a great friend of mine uses the quote, "Where history fails, myth prevails." And I think a lot of times we have to justify why we give our money and time, dedication, and heartfelt effort to this organization. But if you can't find what you're seeking in your lodge, or if your lodge doesn't practice the Freemasonry you want, we also have the ability to travel and find it to the best of our ability. The thing that I personally most enjoy about Freemasonry is the self-evaluation. Throughout all of our lectures, we are given a great example. And sometimes if we apply those lectures, not just regurgitating the ritual, but if we apply some of those lessons, when we look in the mirror, we either see a brighter version of ourselves, we see a darker version of ourselves, hoping that through those lectures and those tenets, that when we look in the mirror the next day, it'll be just a little bit better. What I least enjoy is probably from an educational standpoint is when we read the proceedings of our Grand Lodge and other Grand Lodges, and we read our history, we find out that at one time this was such a rich organization. And I think over decades of inadequacy, maybe improper education, and just laxness to bring as many people through the door as we could, we have lowered that bar. And I hope and pray that the younger gentlemen that are joining this organization that I see, that are yearning for knowledge, will restore that to the best of their ability and start raising the gauge or the needle just a little bit back to where we came from and were intended to be. Surprisingly, I'm an avid golfer. I used to play a lot of competitive golf, and now I'm 52 years old, and I enjoy my free time when I'm away from Freemasonry and I get to play and cut up with friends. And I do love to cook. My wife and I started a catering company back in 2009 to set aside some money from our son going to college. By the grace of God, he got an academic scholarship. We were able to use that money in other ways for our 10-year-old, hopefully to set up a college account for her. But those do tie into Freemasonry a little bit, because I have played golf with some friends and we bicker and pick and nitpick about Freemasonry. And cooking especially, because you can find some charitable organizations to cook for with Masonry and the appendant bodies. But a lot of times I really just enjoy that and being away from the day-to-day criticisms and infinite critiquing of Freemasonry. I was extremely blessed with having two parents that were public educators. So I knew a lot of kids that they had my mother in elementary school and my dad in high school. But I believe that there's about 3 lifetime friends that I still reach out to. The rest of my hundreds of friends all have that bind of Freemasonry. Heartfelt, I believe I have. I believe that I cherish my interactions with others, not just Masons, but with others. I take time to evaluate my temper and my demeanor before I engage in a decision or a conversation. And I also truly try to live by that 24-inch gauge, because with working and loving Freemasonry and loving traveling, you have to. It's a lesson that can continue to be taught up into our old years when we're retired and we're still trying to juggle hobbies, family, responsibility. So I would say I have learned a lot myself, and I have seen others as well. I believe it's probably the history of the area. If we go back and look at the history of some of these towns, cities that popped up, most of them popped up along the riverways. So the economy that pulled these areas together from people from all kinds of different rural walks of life in Appalachia, especially here in eastern Kentucky, they either came here for 3 things: timber, coal, or the railroad. Now, outside of work, fellowship was the only thing they had left. I'll use the community of Vanley, a mining community just up the road from us. It was a thriving community until the mines dried up around the 1940s and 50s. A lot of people relocated from there to Michigan, northern Kentucky, Ohio area. But yet what they couldn't take away was an experience that they had through their faith. A lot of times, a lot of churches would get together with family. They would have large picnics after that. It was the fellowship that binded people together. You couldn't get in a car and drive to Lexington or Louisville or Cincinnati in decent time as you can now. There wasn't a whole lot of infrastructure, so you had to rely on one another. You had to rely on the fellowship that you found within these mountains. And I believe that still trickles down through hereditary, through a lot of us. Or for me, that would be my best guess. Just a brief history, as our lodge was chartered in 1860. That was one of the big explosive times in this area, in this community, from timber and coal. From it came some massive coal barons that also give back to the community. Now, when I entered the door as an initiate, and I came in and saw light for the first time in this lodge, I looked around the room and I saw a lot of men that I had known as a young boy that were probably the reason that our community was successful. Not only outside the lodge were they leaders, but inside the lodge they were leaders too. And that's why today, by the grace of God, we're able to celebrate our 100th anniversary of our cornerstone. You never knew they were Masons, but you knew that they worked together. They put aside differences of politics, religious differences, and so forth to make the community thrive. And you could also see that trickle down inside the lodge. Our lodge fell on destitute in the 30s, and we had to sell our bottom floor, which the building was erected, all 4 floors in 1924 for a lodge. The bottom floor was our dining hall. The second floor was the York Route Lodge, third floor the Blue Lodge, and the fourth floor was utilized by the Highland D. Malay. 2013, 14, and 15, our master sat in the chairs along with the officers, and he decided we would start working on the building to make the building more attractive to the community, make the community proud that it was sitting in the middle of town. In 2016 and 17, I was tasked in the East to start an educational program. The theory behind that with some of our mentors was, if the lodge can fix the building for 3 years, it was my job to fix the men in it. So along with a lot of help from our officers and our members, we put together an educational program. And our goal is to give back to anyone coming to the door now what we didn't receive, what I didn't receive, what the individual other officers didn't receive, to try to give back to what we were lacking and we had to search for ourselves. We didn't want them to have to go somewhere else. We wanted them to get it here. And we wanted them to feel comfortable to reach out to a brother, either by grip or mouth to ear, and say, hey, I've never seen this lecture, or I would like to learn this lecture, or I would like to see this presentation done at our lodge. It's paid off. It really has. I'm 52 years old. I sit as secretary. I'm the second oldest man in the chairs. And I'm very proud to see these young guys come through. And I'm very proud for them to call me on the phone and ask me a question. And if I don't know it, I humbly tell them and try to find another mentor that will help them with that answer. As I mentioned earlier, both my parents were public educators. I remember from a young age watching my mom set up brown bags on the kitchen table the night before school. And as I aged, I realized what she was putting in those brown bags, and that was personal hygiene products for kids, because it was very embarrassing. And she would put boxes in the trunk of her car, and she would distribute those discreetly to young kids, young boys and girls, long before family resource centers. As I aged, my dad taught for 44 years, and there's still people in this community that brag on him being an educator. I will never reach those goals. I know that. But I think I would like to be known as that person who could help someone that doesn't need credit for it. I would like to be known as someone that could help educate someone because of my lack of education, that I searched out and found something. I'd like people to know that I'm a man of my word. I'd like my son to be a man of his word. And I'd like him to learn from examples that I didn't create, that I took from other mentors as I walked through life. If I could change anything in Freemasonry, it would be that through our beautiful lectures and ritual, that somehow, out of all the tenets and lessons that are taught out of that, we could teach commitment and dedication. Because I think titles sometimes, and I've seen it, take away from true commitment and dedication, and they stray us away from the lessons and the tenets that's taught together. Why Freemasonry? Probably self-evaluation.